In this video, we'll look at the picture box control, which allows you to display image files from your local machine or from the network. Using properties of the control, you can adjust how the image is displayed within the picture box. You can reset the boundaries of the control to wrap around the image. You can zoom into the image, you can resize the image, you can create margins around the picture box, and a lot more. To demonstrate some of the features of the picture box control, I created a simple application called PictureBox CS. Let's run it and take a look at some of the features we'll be highlighting in this video. So when our example loads up, notice that by default we can't even see the boundaries for our picture box control. Let's go ahead and set the border property equal true so we can see that. And now I'm going to click the initialize picture box hyperlink, and behind the scenes this set a couple of properties which we'll talk about in a few moments after we get done with this initial demonstration here. The next thing I'll do is set the background image to a tiled small logo for my website by setting the background image property of our picture box control. And now I'm going to click the load image link, and what this is going to do is go out to the internet and download a logo. So this operation, depending on my connection speed, might take a moment or two. While that graphic is loading, notice that briefly we'll get this little green circular refresh logo that'll appear, and it'll flash on the screen briefly before our image loads. So here we go. Okay. So that little interim logo that we saw, that little interim graphic that we saw, was set in the initialized picture box, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Now let's try to load a different image from the internet. I happen to know that this image actually does not exist. And I want to do this to kind of demonstrate what happens in a picture box whenever an image does not exist. Notice that I get a different image. This is not the image that I intended to load, but it is an error image that's also set in that initial picture box hyperlink click event. Also, we'll demonstrate how to load an image from our local hard drive. And then we'll take a look at the various size modes for our picture box, which kind of change the behavior of the picture box. For example, we can stretch the image to fill the entire size of our picture box. We can set that back to normal. We can use the zoom feature, and we can use the center image feature, and then finally we can set the auto size. Notice what happens whenever we click this one. The boundaries for our picture box wrap around the size of the image. So again, these are the different behaviors that we've enabled through the size mode property of our picture box. Let's briefly take a look at the code that it required to make this. First of all, we click the set border link, and simply there what we're doing is using one of the border style enumerations to set it to fixed single. There's a couple of different values we can select here, like fixed 3D, which will add kind of a double border around it, or no border style at all. Then next we click the initialize picture box, and what we did here was set two properties that at first didn't really manifest themselves in any meaningful way, but later on as we did some of the other operations that they did show up. And the first thing we did was set the error image. Now notice that in C# I'm using the images that were in my resource file by accessing them by going to properties.resources.error. And this is a strongly typed name for each of the images that I've added into the resources for my project. So if you go to the resources by double-clicking properties, going to the resources tab, and then selecting images from the resource type drop-down, notice that I have a background image, an error image, a logo image, and a loading image. So to create these, I just dragged and dropped them from a subfolder I created into the resource main area here, and it created automatically strongly typed names so that I could access them programmatically by using the properties.resources class. And this error image displays whenever we pass a bad location for an image to our picture box. So it's kind of the default image that will show up if the picture box can't resolve to a actual image, whether on our hard drive or out on the internet. The next thing I did was set the initial image property, and this is what was displayed whenever we were loading the logo from the internet. Remember that green little refreshing circle graphic that displayed briefly before we then displayed the logo from the internet? Well, the way that was accomplished was by setting the initial image equal to our loading graphic, again from our resource file. The next thing we did then was set the background image. Simple. All we did was just set the background image property of our picture box to, again, another file within our resources file. Then after that, we click the Load Image button, or rather the Load Image link, which set the image location to a URL. You see here that this points to www.learnvisualstudio.net/images/LVS logo small. The next thing we did was try to set that image location to a location that actually did not exist. So I just copied the previous URL and just added this _error.gif. Since that did not display, what was displayed instead was whatever we set our error image to. Back as our, we could either do it as our form loaded or as we did it in kind of an initialize event that we're handling. After that, we then loaded an image from our local hard drive. Now to do that, I'm still using the image location property. However, in this case, I had to do a little extra work to determine the actual location, and so I'm using some of the base class libraries classes in order to retrieve the proper folder for my current environment. So I get the special folder My Documents and find it for this particular user on this particular computer by selecting the Get Folder Path method, saving that, and tacking on the name of the file. So we kind of hard-coded this here. Probably would have been better to store this in some XML file or configuration file of some sort, but again, for the purpose of demonstration, just hard coding that in, and then setting it equal to our image location. The rest of this example really was based around the size mode property. And so we handled the selected index changed event, and we take a look at the value that was selected by the user in the size mode combo box using a switch statement. And then based on the case, we simply set the size mode property to one of the enumerations called picture box size mode. So the picture box control is fairly straightforward. It allows you to display a graphic image within your WinForms application, and it provides some nice features to handle the loading of images and what happens when we can't actually locate an image on a file share or out on the internet through some of the initialization properties that we looked at. We can also kind of change the behavior of how the picture box displays those graphics by changing the size mode property. And so hopefully this will help you if you need to use this sort of control within your applications.